All right, lovely. Sally, welcome. Hi. How are you? You had a good day? Oh, sorry, you're still on mute though, Sally.
Here I am.
So you had a good day?
Yeah, it's been really good. Thank you. Yeah.
Are you calling it a day, or are you gonna have to go back to work after this?
Oh
or...
God, no, I'm done. Done. How about you?
Oh yeah, so I'm still gonna keep doing these actually. So I usually don't do them this early. So the last one today starts at 4 a.m. So it's gonna be a good long day for me actually.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Wow.
Yes.
So I count my blessings then that I don't need to work after this. I'm hoping to join you in wine drinking, so there's no way I'll be
You know what? Feel free, after this we keep in touch. Send me a message. You can do the next sessions if you wish. Absolutely no problem. Yes, it's the beautiful thing of COVID lifestyle.
Well, if we can't cheer ourselves up with a nice glass of wine, what else? Why deny ourselves?
Indeed. I saw some kind of news, I think it was from the UK, that they said that alcohol could interfere with the COVID vaccine. And I was like, oh my God, please no, don't come up with an excuse to like ban wine.
Yeah, well, I have to say most of my January has been dry. So, but it wasn't an intentional dry January thing. I just wanted to focus on my creativity, doing some projects. But actually, I think people are finding it harder if they're used to drinking, they're finding it harder this January than others. Mm-hmm. And I'm not looking to have the vaccine anyway. So let's hope that, but for the people that are having it, let's hope that alcohol is not.
It's not, yes, it is. Although, Sally, that's very brave of you to do a dry January during a pandemic.
I know. But the thing is, I've actually been really feeling really good, like really inspired this January. It's for me because I'm getting back into design, drawing and painting, and I'm customizing things for people. So actually, I've probably had one of the most fun creative times because I can't go anywhere, but it's a good thing because it's giving me all this time to be able to create.
That's so interesting. I'm not able to be, I'm much more creative after glass 2. and it's actually not really a joke.
Same here, Rafa.
Yes,
I'm in your team.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
totally agree.
Like for me, after glass
it definitely helps, doesn't it?
Especially in Portugal with the good wine that we have.
Oh my God, yes. It's exactly like that. After glass 2, it's my creativity comes up. I enter a flow moment and it's like, wow, look at all these ideas. So this might sound weird.
Well, looking here forward to being sold some interesting information on Portuguese wine. So I can look for it for my next purchase.
Yeah, definitely. After this, we're going to keep in touch. We're going to keep in touch. Yes. And feel free to text me anytime you wish. Absolutely. So by the way, welcome everybody. Sorry, Sally and I kind of got into a little conversation here. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes to see if more people join. People are still slowly joining in. If you don't have your wines yet, you can grab them. We're going to be tasting really soon. And again, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes to see if more people join. So take your time. Oh, and by the way, we've had enough restrictions in our life. The last thing you need is a wine tasting where I ask you to not drink. Feel free to start to sip already, okay? Although, if you want to do the most of this, try to hold on the cheese if you have some, so that I can give you a clear before and after. But again, if you had a long day and you're really hungry, go for it. Absolutely no problem at all. All right, so we're just gonna wait a couple more minutes. And then
that's really annoying. You're making me want cheese now. I don't have any.
Oh, well, it's okay. It's okay. Just remember this for next time. Just like, I mean, I think it's a good idea because a dry January with cheese in the fridge, it's tempting.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm forgetting dry January now anyway. I'm back on the wine, don't worry. But yeah, cheese would have been good. I've had my dinner already in preparation, but I forgot to get cheese in.
No problem at all.
Next time.
Problem. It's so funny. Even Muthu on the chat is saying that 2 p.m. in Miami, not drinking time yet. So wait, does that mean that in Miami you don't even drink?
Why wouldn't you drink at 2 o'clock?
Yes, I mean,
Come on.
2 p.m. is very acceptable, Muthi.
Yeah, that's lunchtime. Of course you can drink in Miami.
On a Wednesday, 2 p.m., probably not. Tuesday and Thursday is fine.
Okay, we'll take your word
for that. Do this in the democratic way and just vote, and then
yes.
you have to choose.
Yeah, I like that, Sandra.
Oh, lovely. All right. So again, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes. Oh, lovely. Anna already shared my info. So yeah, I usually do that at the end, but Anna already did it. That's lovely. After this, you all have a private wine advisor for the rest of your life. Text me anytime you wish. I will always help you out. Never hesitate to reach out. Okay. Anna, by the way, what do you think? Should we wait a couple more minutes or should I go?
I think we can start already.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, sure, it will be recorded.
All right, lovely, great. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for doing this. So I'm Rafael, but please call me Rafa, okay? When people call me Rafael, something weird goes through my spine and I don't feel great. So only call me Rafael if you really dislike this today. I'm Portuguese, but I was actually born and raised in Switzerland. And then my parents decided to move back to the country when I was 14, so then I moved back with them. And then in Portugal, we live all the way in the north, just by the border with Spain. And if I actually turn off my video, that's a little picture of my backyard right now, which I would really happily show you around, but it's already dark in Portugal. But here for you to have an idea, at the end of the river, at the end of the vineyard, there's a river that separates Portugal from Spain. So the mountains you see at the back, that's already the Spanish side. So if you'd be good swimmers, you could literally swim to Spain from our vineyard. And so we moved back here when I was 14. I joined hotel school. And then once I was done, I started to work in luxury hospitality. So I was actually blessed enough to start in the 3 Michelin stars in the south of France. And then it was really easy to get a job after that. So then from there, I went to Bulgaria, Russia, to the United States, Poland, Malta, London, back to Switzerland for a year. And then I got tired of it and I said, no, I just want to come back home and I want to open my own business, which I call it my little hole, by the way. And the reason why I call it my little hole is because it's probably the smallest wine bar you've ever seen in your life, downtown Porto City. I can only sit 6 people at the time. So there's no way I could sit all of you right now there at once. And whenever there's 6 people in the house and someone needs to go to the bathroom, everyone else needs to stand up. So it's that small. And this is actually what I do for a living. I only do wine tastings 7 days a week. I never close and I only do them through reservations. And I usually, and by usually I mean before COVID, I would usually go to London 6 to 8 times a year and to New York City 4 to 5 times for geeky professional wine tastings, let's say. And that's what actually motivated me to open my own business. Because when I was studying wine and working in fine dining, I quickly realized that in the wine world, we complicated it way too much for the consumer. So the whole point 2 years ago was let's go back home. Let's get something extremely small, first of all, so that the 6 people that fit in there have to talk to each other. So it's always going to be friendly and cozy and nice. But most importantly, let's actually teach people something through tastings so that the next time you lovely people have to pick wine on your own, you're not going to get the pretty label anymore. I know you do that. Nice colors, nice designs, nice shapes. We grab those bottles and we technically don't really know what we're buying. So hopefully we're going to be able to break that today. So I'll break down the whole session in 4 parts. First, I'm going to give you a quick theory. It's going to be 10-15 minutes max, just so you know the important keywords you should be aware of when it comes to wine. Then we're going to taste the wines together so that you can see what those keywords actually mean from a tasting standpoint. Then we're going to see how the wines change the moment you eat a little bit of cheese. If you have any, no worries if you don't. And ultimately, we're going to enjoy the rest of the session through a Q&A open chat kind of conversation, because I feel that people through questions learn way more. And it's also an opportunity for you to ask any wine question you might be wondering about. All right. Nevertheless, before I start, in case you were one of the last people to join, again, we've had enough restrictions in our life. The last thing you need is a wine tasting where you have to listen to me for 15 minutes and stare at your wines. Feel free to sip on your wines already. There's actually no problem at all. Although, if you wish to do the most of this session, I would kindly ask you to try to hold on the cheese just for 10 minutes so I can give you a clear before and after. But again, if you had a long day or if you're really hungry, feel free to go for it. It's not going to be that problem. All right? Lovely. So again, tonight it's about approaching wine from a different perspective so that you can take your success rate to a higher level whenever you're shopping for wine. And let's start by how you should approach white wines in general. You are at the wine shop, you're at the wine aisle, you have all those amazing labels looking at you and calling for your name. The most important thing about white wine is actually how was it made. White wine is extremely sensitive to how it is produced. So no matter where you are in the world or which grape you're using, the winemaking techniques used to make white wine will always impact every white wine the same way. And the most important winemaking technique of them all is, without a doubt, was the white wine made in an oak barrel or not? And that's because when your white wines are not in an oak barrel, they will always be fruit forward and refreshing, something to sip on a summer day. On the other hand, if you put your white wine in a barrel, no matter what's the grape, no matter where you are in the world, you are always going to add wood, smoke, vanilla, and spices flavors to your white wine. And it's also going to make your white wine feel a little bit heavier. So that's definitely the first concern you should have when you're considering buying any white wine from anywhere in the world. Once you got winemaking out of the way, the second layer that matters the most is the climate. Did the white wine come from a cool climate or a warm climate? And that's because when your white wines come from a cool climate, they will give you more of a sour, green apple, citrus kind of flavors, which is what consumers tend to call dry. And when they come from a warm climate, they will give you more of a stone fruit and a tropical flavor, which is what you tend to call sweet. Which we're never going to use those words again, are we? No, we're not. Because from now on, Rafa is going to randomly text you to see what you've been drinking. And I really do it. And I don't want to hear the words dry and sweet when I do so. And that's because dry in the wine world specifically means no sugar in your wine. And sweet specifically means sugar in your wine. So don't use those words when you're describing fruit flavors. And once you realize how the wine was made and if it came from a cooler or warmer climate, then you can start to worry about the grape they used. But until the day you text me and you say something along the lines of, Raf, I found my love. I love Sauvignon Blanc because it's the only one in the world that gives me a gooseberry flavor. Until the day you smell and taste gooseberry out of Sauvignon Blanc, how it was made, and if it came from a cooler or warmer climate, dictated 95% of what you are going to be able to smell and taste from it. And that's what you should focus on the most when you're shopping for whites. And consumers love to do the opposite. I don't like Chardonnay. I only drink Sauvignon Blanc. I don't like Spanish whites. I only drink Italian whites. It doesn't matter. Winemaking and climate is the most important things you should master first. And actually tonight, I'm going to segue from my usual talk. Anyone here in this chat ever tasted a Chardonnay from California that smelled and tasted a lot like butter? We call them the buttery Chardonnays. And let's go through that. And in case you never had any, again, Chardonnay, wines made from the Chardonnay grape in California, they're very famous for smelling and tasting like butter. And it's usually a polarizing flavor. People either really like it or really dislike it. And especially for the group of people that tends to dislike it, they usually discard the whole category altogether. They say no more Chardonnay or no more Chardonnay, no oak barrel. I don't like that butter flavor. When that butter flavor actually has nothing to do with the wine being made from Chardonnay, and it has nothing to do with the wine being made in an oak barrel. That's a huge misconception. That buttery flavor comes from another winemaking technique. Again, people, winemaking is the most important things about white wine. And we call that winemaking technique Monolactic Fermentation. which you might hear some people call it malo, other people MLF, other people ML. This is the problem of the wine world. We come up with 20 different terms for the exact same thing. But here, the important takeaway for you as a consumer is this is a completely independent winemaking technique that you can make in any wine in the world that is going to convert the malic acid you have in the wine to lactic acid, which is the acid you find in dairy product. And that's why when you smell those wines, your brain thinks of butter and cheese and cream. But because it's a completely independent winemaking technique, you can actually make it happen in any wine in the world. So never discard Chardonnay or Chardonnay from California altogether because of the butter flavor, because I could find you lots of Chardonnays from California that don't give you any butter flavor at all. To give you a different approach as well, at my wine shop, the most basic tasting I have is a set of 6 glasses, 3 whites and 3 reds. And based on the way I force people to smell and taste them, by the time they reach the last red, they smell melted butter. And they're like, wow, that's so weird. Butter on a red wine? I'm used to get it on white. And I'm like, yeah, John, Monolactic fermentation. You can make it happen in any wine as long as you wish to. To give you a food analogy, when people say they don't like Chardonnay because it's buttery, it's the same thing as if the first time you tasted shrimp in your life, it was too spicy. And now you say, Raf, I don't eat shrimp, it's too spicy. Does that make sense? So now, to come back to my usual talking before we start to taste our white wines together, when your white wine comes from a cool climate, so again, sour, green apple, citrus kind of flavors. On top of wrongly using the word dry to try to describe those wines, sometimes you also like to say that the wine is acidic. And again, acidity in the wine world has a very specific meaning. When we talk about the acidity, we are talking about the pH of the wine. Nothing to do with sour flavors. You will have one reaction in your mouth to a low pH content. And this actually works with wine, beer, cocktails, whatever you'll have. You're going to start to salivate at the bottom of your mouth. So now I'm going to kindly ask you to get your white wine ready so that we taste it together. And if you don't have white, you can use your red wine. But if you have white, it's better. And I'm just going to wait 10, 15 seconds in case someone is still pouring. I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds here. Take your time if you're still opening and pouring, okay? The last thing we need in 2021 is a wine tasting where we're stressed. All right, I'm just gonna scroll to see if I can see people. All right, there we go. All right, lovely. Okay, so we're gonna taste the wine together, but you're gonna taste it a little bit differently than how you used to. You're gonna taste your wine the following way. You're gonna make sure you take a good amount, and you're gonna make sure you swish the wine around your mouth. And as soon as you swallow the wine, you're going to bend your head. And notice how much saliva you're going to be producing at the bottom of your mouth when you have your head bent. So go ahead, give it a taste, take a good amount. Make sure you swish it a few times around your mouth. And as soon as you swallow the wine, bend your head. And as you have your head bent, don't open your mouth, you're going to drool your tables, okay? And you probably noticed now that if you would have dared to open your mouth when you had your head bent, you would have literally drooled out. And this drooling feeling you felt, that's what we call in the wine world, the acidity of the wine. So from now on, whenever you hear a sommelier or a winemaker or anyone from the wine world talk about a wine and they say that the wine is very acidic or that it has a good acidity, that's what they're talking about. The wine is making them drool. Nothing to do with sour flavors, okay? Don't text me next week saying you found the white wine of your life because it's very acidic when you're trying to say it tastes like lemon. Those are two very different things, okay? And this acidity, once again, how much you salivate from drinking your wines, is actually the best thing you could wish for. The more, the better. You will never hear a sommelier or a winemaker complain that their wines make people salivate too much. It's a good feeling. It's actually what refreshes your palate. It's what makes you want to drink more and more and more. Without this salivating feeling, after a couple of sips, you would give up on the wine. That's what keeps you going. But please, everybody, you need to make a distinction from salivating a lot to tasting sour citrus kind of flavors. And that's what you need to master properly first about white wine before we move on to red. Always focus first on how they were made. No matter what's the grape, no matter where you wine the world, no matter how much we like to tell you about our soil. If the white wine is not made in an oak barrel, it's always going to be fruit forward and refreshing. If it was in an oak barrel, you're going to get the wood, the smoke, the vanilla, and the spices. If they do malolactic fermentation, you will get the buttery flavors. And then if the wine came from a cooler climate, the fruit flavor of the wine will be more sour citrusy. And if it came from a warm climate, it will be more stone fruit tropical. Okay? So that was white. Winemaking matters the most, then it's the climate, and then it's the grape. Red wine is actually completely the opposite. What matters the most about red wine is the grape that they use to make the wine. And the reason why, it's because different red grapes will give you a different amount of tannins. You probably heard that word already, tannins, or a red wine that is very tannic. What is that? What does that mean? So tannin, by the way, it's extremely complex. We write pages on tannins. You could do a full dissertation on them, but avoiding to make it boring for you to the point where you would fall asleep. Tannin, basically speaking, comes from the skin of the red grape, and tannin loves and actually needs protein. That's why they say red wines with meat. Because if you're having a red wine that has a lot of tannin and you don't eat any protein, what's going to happen is that those tannins, they're going to be feeding off the protein they find in your saliva, and that's why your mouth gets dried and bitter and astringent with some red wines. That's the tannins. They need protein, but you didn't care to eat any. So now the only protein they find is the one in your mouth, drying up your mouth. Which, people, you know where this is going, don't you? When that happens, don't say you don't like dry red wines, okay? Dry means no sugar. Dry is the opposite of sweet. If you don't like the dry mouthfeel you'll get with some red wines, what you're trying to say is you don't like red wines with too much tannins in them. And how much tannins you're going to get in your red wine will always be dictated by the grape they use to make the wine. That's a DNA thing of the grape. So whenever you're shopping for red wine, the very first concern you should have is what's the grape they used, so that you can look up how much tannins you're going to get, so that you know if you can sip on it as you answer 3 emails, or if you should wait for Sunday barbecue to open that bottle. Now, before we start to taste our red wines together, you're going to have one area in your mouth that is the most sensitive to the tannins. And that's going to be your upper frontal gum, just above your teeth. And if you just licked your gums, that's very normal. That's a reflex. Your gum dries up, your brain alarms you, so you go, and you hydrate your gum box after drinking red wine. So once again, I'm going to kindly ask you to get your red wine ready, and I'm just going to wait 10, 15 seconds in case someone is still fetching the wine. Just going to go around. Here we go. Look at that. All right. Fantastic. All right. So now we're going to taste the red wine together, but we're going to taste it a little bit differently than how you tasted the white. You're going to taste your red the following way. You're going to make sure you take a good amount again, but this time you're going to make sure you pass the wine by the gums a good 4 or 5 times. And once you swallow the wine, notice how much your gums dry up, but please don't lick your gums until I say so. I want you to feel those tannins all the way, okay? So go ahead, give it a taste of a red wine. Make sure you take a good amount. Make sure you swish it around your gums a good 4 or 5 times. And as soon as you swallow the wine, notice how much your gums dry up. And again, I know it's going to be tempting, but don't move your tongues once you swallow the wine. And I'm going to walk you through what you're feeling. Your gum will start by drying up. Then your lip is going to slowly stick to your teeth. And it's slowly starting to be uncomfortable. You really wish I would let you lick your gums, wouldn't you? That's the tannins. They need protein, but you didn't care to eat any protein. And on top of it, you didn't even care to check what was the grape they used to make the wine when you bought the wine. You grabbed the bottle because of the cute giraffe on the label, and that's why now your mouth is uncomfortably dried up. All right, go ahead, lick your gums. And again, how much your mouth will dry up when drinking red wine, which I would love for you to slowly to get used to saying, how much tannins you're gonna get in your red wine will always be dictated by the grape they used to make the wine. That's a DNA thing of the grape, okay? For example, a red wine made from Cabernet Sauvignon will always have more tannins than one made from Pinot Noir, no matter where it comes from. Again, no matter how much we like to talk to you about the soil, that's a DNA thing of the grape. So please, when you buy red wine, the very first concern is to check the grape they used. Now, finally, let's see how everything changes the moment you eat some cheese. So if you have cheese, it's time to go through it. And by the way, in the chance you made one of those really good looking boards, for now, no jam, no fruit, no crackers, no bread. For this example, just cheese. After this, feel free to enjoy whatever you got as a snack. But for this example, I would kindly ask you just cheese. And as you peacefully enjoy your cheese, I'm going to explain you what's going on next. Once you go through a couple pieces of cheese and you go back to your red wine, now your red wine is going to feel much smoother than the first time. And that's because now we are going to give the tannins of the red wine another source of protein. So now the tannins, they will be feeding off the remaining particles of cheese in your mouth, let's say, and that's why the wine is going to feel much smoother. So take your time, no rush, enjoy your cheeses. And whenever you feel like it, just go back to your red wine and notice how smoother and more enjoyable it got now. And I'm just gonna wait a couple of seconds just in case you're doing it. And it's very normal if you have a much happier reaction and face after the cheese. The faces after the cheese are always happier than before the cheese. It's always like that. But again, what's the logic behind this? It's exactly the same red wine. It's just before some food versus after food. And that's why I cannot bother you enough with this tonight. When you buy red wine, check the grape first. Because if you grab a bottle of red wine just because your best friend told you to give it a try, or because, I don't know, you're on a Portuguese wine kick, so as long as it's Portuguese, you grab it, and then you get home and you sip on it without any food as you enjoy Netflix, and you happen to have bought something with a lot of tannins without knowing, then your mouth is going to be uncomfortably dried up. And that's what I want you to take away from tonight before we just go through some Q&A that anyone might have. I want you to promise me, and I'll beg you if I have to, that for the next 2 months, you won't care where the wines come from anymore. And you're going to make sure you master properly first, selecting your wines based on the structure of it. It is much more important for you to know if the white wine you have in your hand was made in an oak barrel or not, than if it's going to taste like green apple or red apple. It's much more important to know if your red wine you have in your hand was made with grapes with a lot of tannins or not, than if it's going to taste like strawberries or cherries. Structure trumps flavor every time. After this, so Anna actually already left my info here, so you can scroll up on the chat. Feel free to reach out to me if you wish, and you'll send a food and wine pairing cheat sheet. And like this, you will never do a bad food and wine pairing again in your life. Because I dream of the day where I can safely open my Instagram when I wake up in the morning and I don't see people drinking champagne with cake. That's going to be a beautiful day the day that happens. And oh my God, what I saw now with the holiday seasons, we need to talk about that one as well. And the day you bought a dozen bottles and you always nailed oak barrel or not, high tannin, low tannins, then it makes sense for you to start to compare different regions, different grapes, different soils, high altitude versus low altitude, rare birds that fly around the vineyard, and that's why the wine is so special. All those beautiful poetic things we like to talk about. All right? All right, lovely. So let's go through some Q&A. Who wishes to go first? Oh, I actually have a question here from Jem on the chat. Asking, hey Raf, how do you know that when you are, let's say, in the supermarket? That's a great question. So let's go through it. How do you know all these beautiful poetic things that I've just shared with you just by looking at the bottle? And let's start with red wine because it's a little bit more obvious. So again, what's the most important thing when you're considering buying a red wine? How much tannin it has. Why? because the more tannins you have, the more important it is for you to have some food for it. And how do you know that? By the grape they use to make the wine. So let's walk down the wine aisle together. Let's imagine you go to your wine shop for the first time ever. Okay, you've never tasted wine before this. Life was kind of sad before. And you're gonna have your first wine tomorrow. And you go at the shop and you grab your first ever bottle of red wine. And you see that this red wine was made with a grape called the Cabernet Sauvignon, for example. You've never heard of Cabernet Sauvignon. You pick up your phone and straight on search, no magazines, no wine apps, none of that nonsense, okay? Straight on search, you write down, is Cabernet Sauvignon high or low in tannins? And you're gonna see it's gonna say high. Not what you wanted. You wanted something low in tannins to sip as you read the book. Next bottle, it says Grenache. Hey, is Grenache high or lower in tannin? You're gonna see it's on the lower side. So the moment you figured out what was the grape they used to make the wine, if you've never heard of it, all you have to do is to look it up online. You will always find if it's high or low in tannins. And that's because, again, it's the DNA of the grape. So it's the only information wine brands and wine regions cannot manipulate for their vested interest, let's say. Right now, you could have a producer from Bordeaux and another one from Napa fighting about who has the best cab. If there's one thing they can disagree on, both of them are going to be high tannins. So you will always find that information online. You will have one extra step if the wine is European. And that's because more often than not, European wines don't have the grape on it. Usually the region where the wine comes from already dictates the grape or the few grapes they are allowed to use in that wine region. But let's have a practical example again. Let's imagine tomorrow you are going to the shop and you have a Chianti in front of you. You have no idea what's the grape they use in Chianti. Again, all you have to do is to pick up your phone. How do I know what's the grape they use in Chianti? And you're going to see that in Chianti, it has to be predominantly Sangiovese. Never heard of it. Second search. Sangiovese, does it have a lot of tannins or not? And you're going to see it does. And that's how you will always know if the red wine you have in front of you is more to sip on or more for heavier foods. White wine, knowing if it was in an oak barrel or not, is a very similar approach. So if the wine is European, again, the wine region where it comes from will have a specific word or term that means that the wine was in an oak barrel. So let's go through a practical example again. Tomorrow you want to do a Spanish paella, so you might as well get some Spanish white wine. So you grab a bottle of Spanish white wine and you see that this white wine was made in a wine region called Ryoha. You've never heard of Ryoha. Again, you pick up your phone and you look it up. How do I know if Ryoha is in an oak barrel or not? And you're going to see that in Ryoha, by law, they have 4 ways of labeling their wines. If it only says Ryoha, it means no oak at all. And then if it either says Crianza, Reserva, or Gran Reserva, it means a different amount of time spent in oak. And that's where you realize that the bottle you have in your hand says Gran Reserva, and now you know that means it was for a long time in an oak barrel. What's the problem with this though? Every time you'll change wine regions in Europe, you're going to need to do the search again. And that's because obviously you think the Portuguese and the Spanish would agree on a common term? You think the French and the Italians would agree on a common term? Absolutely not. So in Europe, you're going to have to take it one wine region at the time to play safe. Outside of Europe, the rule of thumb is they will label it if it was in an oak barrel. The broad rule of thumb is if they don't say anything, it's because it was not in an oak barrel. And the logic behind this is putting your wine in an oak barrel is seen as something premium. So when you do it, you proudly say you did it, okay? Which, by the way, I wish I had a one-size-fits-all for you, but unfortunately, the wine world is such a mess that the only alternative would be like, hey guys, here's 10,000 books, read them all, see you in 7 years. And then you would be one of my wine geeky friends. And this way, all you need is your phone and always look at it this way. If it's a European wine you have, the wine region tells you the grape or the grapes they can use, and they would tell you what's the word or term that means if the wine was in an oak barrel. And outside of Europe, more often than not, you will have the grape on the label, and they will label if it was in an oak barrel. I hope that was practical enough for you and I didn't confuse you even more. So Rich saying, how do you know which white wine is good for both drinking and cooking? Well, to be fair, that's more of a personal opinion. I don't think you should spend a lot of money on the wines you're going to add for cooking. Although I have a few friends that are chefs that would quickly disagree with me, and they would say, oh no, the better the wine, the better the sauce, which somehow kind of makes sense. But I mean, I don't know, spending €1,000 on a bottle to put it on a sauce, I don't think maybe it would be the best thing. So to be fair, that's more of a personal thing, Rich. I would say your usual drinking kind of wines, okay? I don't believe you need to go too crazy. So in Europe, I would say don't go above €15, especially if you are either in Portugal, Spain, Italy, or France. Outside of it, maybe $20 max. I think that more than that, you are not, the word wasting is a little bit too strong, but it's not a wine that was made for cooking. So Natalie is asking, how do you differentiate between wines of the same category then? So for example, a white wine, the same winemaking techniques. That's a great question, Natalie. So let's imagine you started broad and you narrow it down to whatever it is. White wine of the same grape, of the same winemaking, now what? And that's where it starts to be geeky. That's where talking about soil starts to make sense. That's where talking about sun exposure starts to make sense. That's where starting to talk about altitude starts to make sense. And I could give you more and more and more details. So that's basically the wine word that we like to use, which is terroir. You might have heard this word terroir. Sommeliers and wine geeks, we like to spit this word constantly, terroir, terroir. So it's basically, that's where that starts to matter. Let's imagine you narrow it down to, I don't know, Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. So that's where you have to look at who's the winemaker. Maybe you're comparing two wines where one winemaker is extremely famous, the other not. You have to compare sun exposure. You have to compare soil types, altitude, and on and on and on. So that's where it becomes geeky. What hurts my soul a little bit is that consumers start in that geeky phase. You try to run before knowing how to walk properly. So it doesn't make much sense for you to compare the soil of Napa if you're comparing a Cab to a Pinot, for example. It doesn't make much sense to compare those two wines that way. You should care first that there are different grapes. One has more tannin than the other one. One has more dark fruit flavors. The other one has more red fruit flavors. But to answer your question, Natalie, that's where terroir starts to make sense. Carlo is asking, sulfite content is the same or similar in all wines with medium or high price? That's a great question as well. So sulfites, you will never know how much they added. But let's talk a little bit about sulfite real quick, because I feel sulfite is too much labeled as a bad thing, and it's not that bad, okay? First of all, sulfite is a natural antioxidant. You will never have a wine with no sulfite in it, okay? You will always have some sulfite in it. And why is that? Because the sulfite, there's already some sulfite in the grape itself, okay? So you will always have some sulfites in it. And we should thank the wine gods for that. Because if they wouldn't have a little bit of sulfite in it, what would happen is that in September, I would harvest my grapes, I would crush them, the grape juice would ferment into wine, and a few days later, it would be vinegar. All right, so thank God there is some sulfite in the grape itself. It's again a natural antioxidant. So that's what makes your wine still be wine for a longer time. Although, let's imagine I want to ship you my homemade wine all the way to you. I'm gonna have to add a little bit more on it. So to make sure that the wine is stable enough, let's say, for the whole journey is going to go through. Because if you think about the journey of the wine, it's quite a harsh journey. Let's imagine, I don't know, you live in Australia, which is a very extreme compared to Portugal, but you're literally on the other side of the world. And you order my wine. I'm going to take the bottle, put it in a box, make the delivery, wait 2 days for someone to pick it up. They will pick it up. It's going to go. God knows how long it stays at the docks. Then it's going to be, I don't know how long it is by boat, but maybe like what, 2-3 weeks all the way to Australia. Then it's going to make it to the customs there. Then it goes to a wine shop. Then God knows how long it stays on the wine shelf of the wine shop. Then you buy the wine. God knows how long it's going to take until you finally open it. So for the wine to go through all these kind of pressure, temperature differences, you're going to need to add a little bit more. But I wouldn't be too scared of sulfites, because sulfites, actually too much of it kills you. That's why every bottle of wine says contains sulfite, because too much of it actually will kill you. But to be fair, for you to drink so much wine so that sulfite kills you, alcohol will kill you first. So don't worry too much about sulfites. I would worry way more about all the other chemicals that don't kill you. And because they don't kill you, they're not required to add it to the label. And those are the ones that are not that great. And you will never know, because they will never say what they did. All right? But sulfite is not that bad, okay? Okay, let me see more questions. Oh God, a lot of questions came up here. All right, sulfite. Okay, so the next one is, what about organic biologic wine? Carlo, great question. So that's where organic comes in. By the way, organic means different things depending on where it comes from. Basically, you need to look at the wine world the same way you look at the world in general. The world is made of a lot of countries that have different laws in their own countries. So you need to check what the laws of that country are or is before you move to that country, for example. So it's exactly the same thing. For example, if you compare organic wine from Europe to the United States, for example, in Europe, for you to be legally authorized to put organic or biologic wine on your label, you cannot use any chemical at all while you grow your grapes, but then you can only use up to 25% of sulfites of what conventional wines are allowed to. If you go to the United States, for example, you cannot add as well at the vineyard any chemical as you grow your grape, and you can't add any sulfite at all. So technically speaking, organic wines in the US are more organic than Europeans. I know that people in the US think it's the other way, but somehow it's not. If you'd actually pay attention next time, an organic wine from Europe sold in the US, it's sold as wine made from organic grapes, not organic wine, okay? So here, organic, that's your safe bet in case you want to make sure you want to drink what the wine gods gave you that year. Nothing else was added on that wine. So that's a safe bet in case you want to go chemical free or whatever. Let me go to the next one. I like Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand and white wine from Germany like Riesling. White and gray Pinot. Can you explain why? Well, it does make sense actually, because to be fair, you mentioned grapes that mostly like a cooler climate, and they're mostly like this, mostly made the same way. So for example, even though in theory, you can make any white wine in an oak barrel, some grape varieties react better than others when they're made in an oak barrel. So there's a reason why when you think about Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, it's because they are usually not made in an oak barrel. And that's why you think of Chardonnay as oaky and buttery, because they actually are okay going through winemakings in an oak barrel and through malolactic fermentation. So it does make sense that you create, well, stereotypes is not the correct word, but a short list, let's say, of type of grapes you like the most, and then they're kind of all the same because they like the same winemaking. So to be fair, a German Riesling and a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, very similar. Light, refreshing, crispy, fruity, and the fruit flavor is very similar. Lime, green apple, lemon. So it does make sense because it's the same category. Let's go to the next one. Okay, usually people complain about it. Okay, that was probably from another question. 1 cup of wine, 1 cup of water. Is this, yes, Alfredo, definitely, okay? That's very true. When we do our geeky wine tastings, sometimes in London and in New York, 9 to 5, we can taste anywhere from 80 to 110 wines. And obviously we don't drink them. When we do those tastings, we spit, because otherwise it would be a massive hangover. But then obviously after that, we go to the wine bar and we enjoy wines. And that's actually our rule. So 1 glass of wine, 1 glass of water. Keeping yourself hydrated will help to either avoid the hangover or so that the hangover is not that big. But I love how people think I'm going to fix people's hangovers. I wish I knew, okay, guys? It would have saved me a lot of headaches. George, okay, do you have a rule of thumb of how long can you keep a wine in your cellar before being at the best for drinking? I've heard white wines, oh my God. I've heard white wines have only 1 to 2 years of shelf life, and reds, usually they have a Crianza style, just 5 years tops, and reservoirs more than that. But how can you know when it's the best time to drink it? So who was that? Oh, it was George. So Jorge. So by the way, that's the $1 million question. That's where we make good money, because unfortunately, it's the only question where I don't have a practical way for you to take. This is the question where you actually need wine tasting skills. For example, even for us, it's not like I take a bottle of wine and I say, oh yeah, this one 10 years. Next, yeah, this one 12. No, it's not that way. We taste the first bottle when the wine is like 1 or 2 years old, and we make an assumption. So I say, I believe this wine, it looks like, based on the quality of today, that is going to age a good 10 or 15 years. But for the sake of this example, let's say 10 years. So normally, halfway through that lifespan, so on year 5, I'm going to taste the second bottle. And I'm going to test my theory. If I see that the wine is aging at the rate I thought, great, kudos, it's going to be 10 years. If I see that it's aging a little bit faster, then I might take it from 10 to 8 years. And if I see that it's aging way too fast, then I call all my friends and we make a feast out of it. But this is where, unfortunately, you need tasting skills. But in case you're curious about it, your wine, when it's young, it only gives you fruit flavors, okay? And eventually winemaking flavors. So for example, wood smoke, vanilla spices, if it was in an oak barrel. And as your wine ages, it will develop new flavors. And for example, to talk about the Cabernet, for example, it's going to be usually mushroom, leather, cigar, tobacco, chocolate. Those are flavors that evolve over time. And what we call the best is when you have a healthy balance of both. Whenever you taste the same amount of young flavors and old flavors, that's the best, which we call the peak. Because from that moment onwards, the only thing that is going to happen is you're going to lose the young flavors. You're not going to develop new old flavors. And basically, that's when we start to say that the wine is becoming too old. It's past the best. Okay, so it's when you have a healthy balance of both. But unfortunately, you need a little bit more tasting skills. Just to finish off on this one, Jorge, so I don't go too long. But please forget that thing of white wines, 1 to 2 years, 5 wines, 5 years, reserve. It has to do with the quality of the wines, okay? Actually, the oldest wine I had was a 1969, and it was a white wine. So when it comes to, is your wine able to age or not, is a quality thing, not a white or red. In a very easy, non-geeky way, the better the wine, the longer it will last. The more basic the wine, the faster it will lose the flavor. Okay? So let's go to the next one. So Muthu, I hear that some Americans, except California and South American wines, added with sugar to taste better, but European wines without any sugar due to local regulations, which means better. Is that true? So that depends on the specific wine regions of the world, okay? But 99% of the times you can't add sugar to your wine, okay? If your wine will have any sugar on it, it will have to be the natural sugars of the grape itself already. So basically speaking, if you want to make a sweet wine, you harvest your grapes, you crush them, you have sweet grape juice. The yeast will convert that sugar into alcohol. And if you want a sweet wine, you need to stop the fermentation before it converts all the sugars to alcohol. And when you stop that fermentation, all the sugars that were supposed to be converted to alcohol, they are not. And it's going to make the wine sweet. But it's not like you can make wine, take 3 tablespoons of sugar, put it in there and make your wine. You can't do that, okay? That's like jail time for the wine gods, all right? You can actually, you can't really do that, all right? Although, look at the specific wine regions, because again, look at the wine region as a designated area where they have a certain set of rules to make wine in that area. And maybe in some situations, they can say, do whatever you wish, and in others, you don't. But I know that it's been framed that way, but I don't know why actually, but I'm hearing that a lot. To be fair, European wines are not extremely healthier than Americans. Here, I would worry more about the batch. The small, usually, okay, don't take this as a religion, but usually the smaller the batch, the more natural, let's say, the higher the volume, the more it will need to add stuff. And that kind of makes sense, because if you're a wine brand that makes, I don't know, 7 million bottles of a certain wine, you need to make 7 million bottles that taste exactly the same. Because consumers don't want one bottle to taste one way and another one to taste the other day, differently another day. So guide more on how big or small the batch is instead of European versus American. I could give you American wines that are lovely and that are very natural, let's say, and I could give European wines that are, to be fair, we use way more chemicals actually. In Europe, basically the wine industry, it's a lot of small growers like me and all my neighbors that we grow probably 4,000, 5,000 kilos of grapes, and we all sell it to a big cooperative or to a big name, okay? So we are somehow, most of my neighbors, it's all part-time winemakers and part-time wine growers. So they're looking for the most comfortable thing, for the thing that gives them the least work and the highest return. So we actually spray our vines way more in some situations. So worry more about how small or big the batch is. It's usually a better indicator instead of European versus American. Darlene asking, Argentine, do you mean alternating to water between wine? Yeah, so you drink 1 glass of wine, you drink 1 glass of water, you drink 1 glass of wine and water, and on and on and on. Anne is asking, what do you think of French wines? So Anne, I love French wines. Now, some wine regions are becoming extremely overpriced. It's so funny. I just had a call from a friend from London before this, and he has actually a shop of fine wine, of premium wines. And he's saying, Raf, during this pandemic, people are buying way more Italians because Burgundy and Bordeaux, the prices are getting ridiculous. And they're starting to notice that Barolo, Brunello, Barbaresco, great wine regions that give you great wines at cheaper prices. So the wines are good, no doubt. Although personally speaking, I think I would buy more, for example, from the Rhone Valley, from the Loire Valley. I wouldn't spend my money on Burgundy and on Bordeaux. I would much faster go to either Rhone Valley, Loire Valley, or to Italy as well. And that's just business, okay? Market demand, so their prices are going too high to a point where it doesn't really make sense. But the wines are lovely, no doubt. What is the ingredient that usually gives you a headache? Tannins, Maria. Oh my God, the headache question always comes up. I really love how people think I'm gonna fix headaches. So I'm so sorry, Maria, it's alcohol, okay? Not the tannins, not the salt, it's alcohol, okay? So I'm so sorry to say it this way, but either drink less or make sure you drink water as you drink wine. Or also make sure you eat. That also matters. But unfortunately, headache is only tied to dehydration, okay? So make sure you just either hydrate yourself or you actually eat something. Did we answer this one? Stepped away for which grapes are the least tannics for reds? Okay, so Darlene, I don't mind giving you and everyone the fish tonight, but I want to make sure you know how to fish on your own tomorrow. We kind of answered already. The grape tells you how much tannins you get. So the truth is that if you would have written that on Google, which grapes are the least tannic, you would have found a huge list of them. And that's because The Pinot Noir, no matter where it comes from, it will never be as high in tannins as Cab. And so is Grenache and Barbera and, excuse me, and Gamay. So you can actually find that information online really easily. That being said, the most common ones, again, Pinot Noir, Grenache, Barbera, Gamay, which you might have heard of it as Beaujolais, because Beaujolais is the wine region, Gamay is the grape they use. Corvina, for example, which you might have heard of it as Valpolicella. But again, Darlene, you can find a huge list of it just by looking it up online. It's a DNA thing of the grape. Jan, does every sunny region, oh, sorry, I'm struggling here a little bit with the chat. Give me just 1 second to make the chat window a little bit bigger. It's gonna make it easier for me. Oh, there we go. So Jan is asking, does every sunny wine region have a chance to produce good wine one day? For example, there's a growing production in the West Bank and Israel, oh, for sure. But I believe that there's not a long history of winemaking in that region. So yes, Jan, to be fair, as long as you have a good climate and it's hot enough to grow good grapes, then it becomes how good are you at making good wine from those good grapes. And that's why, by the way, I think we're a little bit screwed when it comes to global warming. Half of the world is happy. The other half is really unhappy. Portugal and California, every year in October, wildfires. And it's every year the same thing. But Canada and the south of England is really happy because now it's getting warmer and they can finally grow grapes and make proper wine. So to be fair, as long as your region is hot enough to grow good grapes, then if you are good enough to make a good wine out of it, usually you're going to have a good outcome. Okay, so take that approach overall and worldwide instead of just West Bank or Israel. It's going to be like this no matter where you are. So Sandra is asking, how do I know if a wine is a good quality? If a wine quality is good? Okay, so that's a little bit of a harder question. So you can guide yourself a little bit on the price, okay? Usually more expensive means better. Obviously not always. You have some wines that are underpriced, others that are overpriced, which is what we call the stupid window. Some wines are $50 and they should be 60, others are 50 and they should be 40. You will always have that. So unfortunately, there's a big practical way of telling you, Sandra, this is always going to be a way for you to have a good wine. To be fair, the price is a good indicator when it's too cheap. So definitely, I don't know, in most locations in the world, so avoiding Portugal, Spain, France, and Italy, if you're paying, I don't know, less than €5 for the bottle, it's probably not going to be great, okay? So that's a good indicator, but I couldn't tell you like, hey, Sandra, from €12 onwards, $15 onwards. It depends on your market. It depending on where the wine comes from. Obviously, a Californian wine is going to be more expensive than Argentinian wine, no matter what's the grape or how it was made, just because of the labor costs, the cost of the land, marketing budgets, beautiful wine tasting rooms. So it depends more on the business model and or that. So the easiest way is avoid considering your own location, avoid the really cheap wines, and usually you're going to have a better wine. But unless I would know your specific location, which by the way, scroll up all the way on the chat, you will have my information. Text me and I'll answer you that question specifically for your market. All right, Darlene just Googled it, lovely. David, could you give us a recommendation of a smaller batch of red wine that is your favorite with low tannins? Oh my God, that's really, really specific. Let me think about it. Give me just 1 second. Low batch, low tannin red wine. Okay, so it's already a little bit tricky because I like high tannin red wines. Like low tannin for me are a little bit boring. Although when it comes to low tannins, for me, Barbera is amazing. So let me write it here. So Barbera is the grape, Barbera. It comes usually, so it comes from the Piemonte area. So that's northwest of Italy. And usually it's either Barbera d'Alba or d'Asti. And that just means that it's Barbera from the Alba town or from the Asti town. okay? Those are usually, no matter, more often than not, okay? No matter what's the name of the producer, smaller batches, low tannin red wines that I really like. So give it a try to that. If you want a premium Barbera, look for something that comes from the Nizza DOCG, okay? So it's a wine region within the Piemonte that they make higher quality Barbera, let's say. Sandra is asking, if you want to drink a wine at 20 years old, when do you buy it and how do you choose it? So yeah, Sandra, that ties up a little bit to Jorge's question. That's a little bit harder. That's where you need the tasting skills, to be fair. I don't have a practical example for you to tell you like this or that. Although you do have some wine regions in the world that they're famous for creating wines that are 20 years old, they're still good. And why is that? And that's because, for example, if we think about the Barolo wine region, or the Brunello di Montalcino wine region, or, I'm so sorry, Italian wines came up in my mind first. Barolo, Brunello. So those are wine regions that the minimum standard required by law for you to label it as such will be so high that there's no such thing as a low quality wine in those wine regions, okay? So Brunello, we're talking about at least 3 years and 2 months of aging of each 18 months in an oak barrel before they even sell it to the market. If it's a Reserva, you add an extra year. Brunello is 5 years. So because the minimum requirements there are so high, you can assume that most of those wines will be good to age. Now, still, some of them will be better than others. So some of them will age for 10, 12, 15 years, other for 20, 25, 30. I don't know, depending on what's the situation. But that's very specific. If you don't mind, again, just whoever asked that question, I'm so sorry, the chat already went up. Just scroll all the way up. You have my information. Text me and I'll answer it specifically for either your favorite wines or your market. How is it I get a severe headache when after 1 glass of wine? So I'm so sorry, Fatima, okay? I don't have an answer for that. But I get that question a lot. So I've asked doctor friends. It might be due to some kind of intolerance. Usually it's either intolerance to alcohol or other things, but I'm so sorry. That's not my field of expertise at all. I have no idea. I'm so sorry for that. And oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Anna is already saying, I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to. Oh, can I keep going, Anna? Because, and by the way, I don't mind if you have to jump off, but I can take a couple more questions. Can I take a couple more, Anna, or should we go?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just take 1 or 2 more. So Enrico, Sassicaia, Ornellaia, Amarone, of course, like for sure. So there you go. Those are wine regions. By the way, Amarone is not a wine region. It's a style of making wine. Be careful with that. But those are wines that, because the minimum standard is so high, that you will always have good wines. Lena is asking, what do you think about Gewürztraminer? Yeah, I know the word is hard to write. Gewürztraminer from north of Italy is a bit sweet. What do you think about it? So Lena, good job. Because here by sweet, we really mean sugar, okay? Gewürztraminer is very famous for having a little bit of sugar. We call it residual sugar. I like it, actually. The northeast of Italy has a lot of German influence, and Gewürztraminer actually is seen as a local grape variety. I'm very happy you've tasted, because most people, when they think about Gewürztraminer, they go to Alsace, or Austria, or Germany. So I'm really happy you actually tasted Gewürztraminer from Italy. That's really great. Now, what do I think about it? Those are great wines, no doubt. It's usually a wine grape that is not made in an oak barrel and that is very often made with a little bit of residual sugar. So it's not going to be very sweet, but it's going to have some sweetness to it. By the way, it's a little bit sweet Gewürztraminer or Riesling is the best for Indian and Asian food. It's just the best. But that's a personal thing here, Lena. All right. Please, can you send your contact info again? Yeah, Lena, it's just on top of it. Anna just sent it. Oh, you don't see it? So you know what? Anna, could you actually copy paste it again, please? Oh, by the way, Anna, you are texting the waiting room, not the chat. So if you could copy paste it again for the chat, it would be perfect, Anna. Enrico, Fatima, it's either better. All right, lovely again. So yeah, I'm gonna try. So wait, I'll add it here. So my Instagram, it's right here, Rafael de Lima 91, and my website, in case here you wish, rafaeldelima.com. And in case you use WhatsApp, here's my number. Feel free to reach out to me. I will always help you out. If you text me, please use WhatsApp. Don't send me a regular text. WhatsApp would be very much more welcome. And yeah, please, Instagram, email, whatever fits you best. I will always help you out. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining this. Had a lot of fun. Again, enjoy your wine life. If I have one last thing I could say, that's the biggest advice of 2021. Make sure you stock up on wine, because maybe 2021 is the year where instead of buying all the toilet paper, they buy all the wine, and that would be way worse. So make sure you stock up on wine, okay? Thank you very much for doing this, all right? Anna, I don't know if you want to share a few words before we go.
Oh, that's fine. We're gonna let you wrap up.
Lovely.
Okay, thank
Fantastic.
you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a lovely evening. Stay safe.